Gather around, folks, because we need to talk about writing about people from our pasts. Okay? If you read my last Substack post, which I hope you did, if you haven't, head on over and give it a read. But you'll understand why I'm addressing this subject. So let's jump right in and talk about the piece, right? I was hesitant to put that out on my own page because I was actually a little too aware of how I could potentially be perceived, especially by people who really know the details of the situation. I was definitely worried about where people would think my head was at because it's a very intense piece. It's very dark. It's very honest. And that fear was more or less confirmed when someone who I love very much asked me if I was still having feelings for the person I wrote the piece essentially speaking to, a former partner. So I want to talk about a couple things related to that. The first is that essay writing is not necessarily a dispatch from the current moment. So, for example, that piece is not something I sat down and wrote the night before I published it on my Substack. Quite the opposite, actually. In this case, that piece was actually written over 10 months ago. I mean, in the grand scheme of life, sure, 10 months isn't that long, but as far as what I personally feel is a great distance as far as where my head was at, I feel a great distance from what I was feeling then when I wrote it and where I'm at now. When I first wrote that piece over 10 months ago, I was definitely in the position of this is happening right now. If you read the piece, and you already know what I'm about to say, but in case you didn't, I wrote it from a place of I had just met someone new, very surprisingly and kind of quickly out of my last long-term relationship, which had been very complicated. Again, if you read, you know. And when I began that new relationship, I found that I was having a very real, very anxious reaction to this kind of subconscious fear that my former partner would appear in my life again and attempt to complicate something that I felt very protective over. And while I can very confidently say, again, that I'm not in the headspace that I was when I wrote the piece, that's actually not even the point. Where my head is at is not the point. The point is actually that I have to actively refuse to care what they may think or how they may perceive whatever I'm writing. I mean, the truth is that I care very deeply about my audience, we'll call it. I'm so grateful for the people who subscribe, and I hope that they're reading, that you're reading and watching and engaging because you enjoy it or you relate or something like that. But the truth also, the truth that follows that truth, is that I do write for exactly one person, and that person is me. It has to be. It really has to be. But it does take time and a mental commitment to stay in that place of I'm writing for me. I'm publishing these pieces on my Substack for me, for my creative growth process, whatever it may be. And as long as I'm sticking to truth and facts and writing honestly about my perception of the situation, then I'm good with that. I have to let how others perceive me, I have to let that go. So worrying about what people thought about where my head is at right now is something I had to ignore when I chose to publish this piece on my Substack. I think about Anne Lamott's essay, it's called Shitty First Drafts, and I think about it a lot while I'm writing a first draft because the first draft is very challenging, as any writer knows. And she has this really great moment of imagery in the essay where she's telling you as a writer that you have to envision each nagging little voice that wants to disrupt or dictate or manipulate what it is that you might want to tell the truth about. Envision them as mice, little squeaking mice. And one by one, you pick them up by the tail, you drop them in a jar, you close the lid, and you put the jar away. And that's about getting to the truth of what you actually feel about something, getting to the truth of how you want to write about it. You're not going to produce something genuine, something authentic, if you're changing what you're creating because you're worried about what other people are going to say, how they're going to perceive you. Of course you want people to like it. I want people to like what I write. But you have to trust in a long, 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 long process that your people will find you and they will stay. As long as you remain genuine in your message and your intentions are morally sound. By that, I mean, I wasn't sitting around thinking, how can I write a piece to talk about that relationship? How can I write a piece that highlights the ways in which that relationship was really tumultuous? That's not what happened. That's not how any of my writing that I've published happened. I was never just sitting around thinking, how can I possibly write about this person or this subject even? My Substack, what I've always really tried to maintain is that I'm publishing something that came from a real place. I was inspired by something and then I wrote about it. So it's morally sketchy to do it the other way, to sit around, in my opinion, to sit around and think, well, how can I expose this person for what they did to me? I'm sure there are people who are motivated by that. Pain and anger, they're strong emotions, but I don't think that is a sound approach if you want longevity. I just don't think that that's how you're going to get there. What I do think, again, comes back to this idea of staying true to yourself and what you want to create, and the people who are for you will find you. If a piece comes to you and it's your truth, in my opinion, write it. You should write it. Be careful with names and accusations, of course, but if you're sticking to the facts and how you process them, then it's your story to tell. And at the end of the day, what people think about me and my writing is actually none of my business, which is hard for me to say, but it's true. It's none of my business. I can just keep showing up and doing my best and continue to work on my writing. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that the piece that I published, Don't, is actually one that I had been submitting to literary magazines for the past 9-ish months since I wrote it. It was submitted 27 times. It was rejected 27 times. So I was thinking about what I was gonna put out on my Substack next, and I thought, you know what, this one's for me. I think that this is the time for me to put it out. Perception be damned. And I'm gonna push this one out into the world and see what happens. And I did, and I had a lot of wonderful reactions to it. And then I had that question where someone was concerned for me, but there's nothing to be worried about. And on that note of the heaviness of it and why I can understand why someone would think, oh God, is she okay? But I do often feel this conflict between who I am as a person. If you know me, then you know, and maybe even you can pick it up from these videos if you don't know me, that I like to joke around a lot. I'm not often serious. I am sarcastic and I like to goof, but sometimes I write about really dark stuff. I have some dark things from my past, and I'm going to continue writing about dark things from my past. And I'm working on things that are about dark material, and I do hope and I do try to incorporate humor as much as I can and when it feels natural. But again, I can't just force humor in because people expect me to be lighthearted. I have to just let it come naturally when the piece calls for it, when it fits. So it's really important not to try to bend too much or mold into something according to what I think people will want. It's just, I don't think that that's the way for me. If it works for somebody else, best of luck to you. So if you've watched this far, I'm so grateful that you're here, and I hope it's because you're enjoying what I'm putting out, and I hope you'll stay. So more to come, as always. I'm working on things all the time, always trying new things. If you're watching, you can see I have a little microphone now. If you're listening, you might think that I sound better, and that's because I do. It's because I upgraded the tech over here at Right All Along. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.